Hey everyone, welcome back to Naruto Audio Fanfics 2.0, your ultimate destination for epic Naruto stories. I'm your friend, and today we're back with another brand new fanfic filled with action, mystery, powerful emotions, and unexpected twists. And today's story is, what if Naruto was betrayed by his parents but the Kyūbi gave him a new life? Naruto times Fem Haku times Fem Gara x Tenten x Tsuchi Kin x Tenten x Karen OC, Part 1. A story where destinies change, secrets are revealed, and Naruto's true power leaves everyone speechless. If you enjoy fanfics like this, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another amazing story. Now sit back, relax, and get ready for an unforgettable journey. And now, let's start the fanfic. October 10th was a day of celebration, of festivities, and one of mourning. 5 years ago the Yondaime Hokage gave his life for the village hidden in the leaves, Konohagakure no Sato, in sealing away the Kyūbi no Kitsune. Everyone knew that he had sealed it away into one Uzumaki Naruto, and the majority of the villagers as well as a portion of the shinobi despised him and did their utmost to get rid of him one way or another. It was a repeating occurrence, but most especially on the anniversary of the Biju's defeat. Anbu were already on top of the situation. Dog and Weasel had stopped the torture and summoned assistance. Weasel took it upon himself to deliver everyone that they had stopped to Ibiki, while Dog had rushed Naruto off to the hospital, hoping to save his sensei's son from dying. Once he had turned the young man over to one of the very few doctors who actually saw him as a child and not the Kyūbi reborn, he shunshined to the Hokage's office to report. Hokage-sama, this is the last straw. If Naruto survives the night, I am taking him in and training him, the council can go to hell for all I care. Naruto is the last piece I have of my sensei, and I will be damned if I let him get hurt or have his growth stunted any longer. Sarutobi Hiruzen sighed as he thought through everything that had happened over the past few years. Agreed, Hitaki, agreed. I do need to reveal some things to you however, and for me to do that, I need to look you in the eyes, so please remove your mask. While waiting for one of his top Anbu to comply, the old man activated the privacy seals in the office and sat back in his chair. Waving his hand at one of the chairs in his office, Hiruzen ran his hand down his face and sighed. Please take a seat, because this is an SS-ranked secret, and I am afraid you are not going to like what I have to tell you. Sitting down heavily in the offered chair, Hitaki removed the dog mask and turned his full attention to the Hokage. What is it that you would risk so much over to tell me, Hokage-sama? Slowly looking up at the much younger man in front of him, Hiruzen gathered his thoughts for a moment. Namikaze Minato, Namikaze Uzumaki Kushina, and Naruto's two triplet sisters, Natsuko and Natsumi, are still alive. At the hospital, narrowly hanging onto life and deep in a coma at the moment, Naruto was slowly succumbing to the massive amount of damage done to his malnourished body and the many different poisons that had been inflicted on him earlier. As he slowly became more aware of what was going on again, he realized that he was in the sewers and he sighed aloud. The thing was that he had no one to turn to, as he had been living on the streets for the past year, unable to feel safe in the apartment that his Oji-san had provided for him. After walking through the sewers for a while, eventually he started hearing what seemed to be the sound of someone sobbing. He slowly started picking up speed until he entered a rather large room, where there was an area that was caged. Just beyond the bars he could vaguely see what appeared to be a young woman who looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. The only thing that prevented his approach was the fact that he could see several fox tails coming out from under her skirt and fox ears on her head. Staring at her in shock, Naruto started connecting the dots and realized that somehow he had the Kyūbi no Kitsune inside of him. Slowly approaching her and watching her carefully as he did so, he worked through the issues that came to his mind. Naruto was a highly intelligent boy. Contrary to the opinion of most of the villagers, he only hid his smart side due to the way the villagers had always treated him. By the time he had reached her side, he had come to a number of startling conclusions. First and foremost in his mind was the fact that the Kyūbi was indeed a girl. Second was that the Yondaime Hokage hadn't killed the Kyūbi but instead had sealed her inside of him, and that led him to believe that there was possibly more that he had been lied to about. The third thing was that with as heartbroken as the Kitsune sounded, there was a rather large possibility that she wasn't as evil as everyone believed. Coming to a decision that would impact his life far more than even he knew at this point, Naruto crawled into her lap and did as he had seen many children and parents act. Slowly wrapping his small arms around her, he started to hug her and try to comfort her. Miyuki slowly realized that there was someone sitting there with her, and opened her eyes to see a young boy hugging her close trying to comfort her. Red eyes met Azure as she looked at him, and her eyes widened as she realized who it was that was there with her. "Naruto-sama, I'm so sorry," was all she could seem to stutter out. Watching as she opened her eyes, the first thing that came to his mind was that she was quite pretty, but he quickly got rid of that thought when he heard her apologize to him. "None of that Sama stuff please. I am not important enough for that, but that isn't important right now. I have questions that need answers and I'm hoping that you have some if not all the answers I am looking for." Nodding and wiping away the tears, Miyuki sat back against the wall, still holding Naruto. "So what would you like to ask me first, Naruto? Do you know why the Yondaime Hokage chose me to seal you inside of the Hokage's office?" Hitaki Kakashi was a person who didn't get angry easily. This was something that just about everyone knew. However, at that particular moment in time he was seething in rage, most of that directed at the man in front of him, since the source of his ire was nowhere around. "So what you're telling me, Hokage-sama, is that my sensei and his wife came up with this plan to strengthen their clan's bloodlines by separating the Kyūbi no Kitsune's soul from its chakra, sealing the soul into my Ototo. Then they were going to separate the yin and yang chakra and seal one into each of their daughters." Kakashi glared at the older man until he responded. Sighing as he nodded, Hiruzen couldn't help but feel partially responsible for what had happened considering the fact that he had argued against their entire plan. Hi, that is an accurate summation of what they had planned. However, far worse is what else they had planned. They would act as if the remainder of their family had perished in the attack so that they could train their daughters to use Kyūbi's chakra as well as to train them in their clan's ways. They didn't feel the need to take their son with them because they thought that if he was trained too soon that the Kyūbi would try to corrupt him and take his body over. I argued with them for hours after they had accomplished the sealing, telling them that their plans to have the villagers see their son as a hero would never work, but unfortunately for Naruto and myself, Jiraiya and Tsunade sided with Minato and Kushina and left with them to help train their daughters. Gritting his teeth, Kakashi growled deep in his throat. So just when were they supposed to return and what did they plan on doing to get him to accept them as his family when they just abandoned him? Bowing his head in regret, Hiruzen shook his head. They had planned on returning shortly after Naruto makes Genin, and putting him on a team with his sisters. They were supposedly going to betroth him to his two sisters as well as one or two other girls in order to preserve their bloodline and to expand their clan, and that, along with teaching him the Hiraishin no Jutsu and the Rasengan, were supposed to make it up to him. I cannot be held blameless in this. No matter how much I argued with them, they were stubbornly set on this course of action, and I fear for Naruto's sanity when he learns what they have done. Standing up and beginning to pace, Kakashi thought about what he could do to help Naruto. Spinning on his heel, he looked up at the Hokage. I have an idea, and it will be painful at first, but it is better than the alternative. Intrigued, the elderly man looked up at Kakashi and motioned for him to continue. The problem with what Namikaze-san is planning is that he saw things turning out much differently than they have. I say that we act accordingly, seeing as how nothing has gone right where Naruto is concerned, and talk with him about everything as I'd rather him hear about all this now, rather than later. This way we can help him while he's still young enough to learn that not everyone is against him, and we can also keep him here instead of possibly pushing him away. Opening his mouth to angrily retort, the Hokage paused as a thought struck him. You intend to start training him as soon as he gets out of the hospital, don't you, Kakashi? As the younger man nodded, Hiruzen sat back and thought about what Kakashi had just hinted at. From the examinations he had seen done on Naruto, he already had Chunin level reserves, and he was only 5. Looking back up at the younger shinobi, he opened his mouth, paused, cleared his throat and crossed his arms over his chest. What is your goal in doing this, Kakashi? At the hospital, in Naruto's mindscape the positions were reversed now. He was still sitting in Miyuki's lap, but this time he was sobbing his heart out about everything that she had told him. The fact that his parents were still alive and had practically abandoned him tore him up inside. Then there was the fact that his parents had come up with a stupid plan to train his sisters for almost 10 years and then show up like nothing was wrong. To top it all off, they just wanted to use him to improve their bloodline, like he wasn't even a person to them, just something that they could use. As Naruto was emotionally venting, his mind was speeding through possibilities when his brain stopped as he remembered something that Miyuki had mentioned in passing. Wiping his eyes as he slowly put himself back together, he looked up into her eyes. "Nay, Miyuki-chan, didn't you mention earlier that because you are a tailed demon that you regain your chakra over time, and that the Biju were the source of all bloodlines?" Watching as she tried to figure out where he was going with this, he waited for her to respond. "Hi, because there were faults in the sealing array that your parents used as they were trying to avoid having to summon the Shinigami, there was an error made that allowed me to gain my chakra back. The reason for this and another very important error is because they were rushing and didn't have the time to really closely double-check everything." Here she paused and squeezed Naruto close to her. "The other thing that you wanted to know is yes, I and my brothers and sisters are the origin of most if not all the bloodlines in existence." "Why?" Closing his eyes and laying his head on her chest, Naruto sighed as he thought about what he wanted to say. "Miyuki-chan, is there any way that you could not only give me a bloodline or two, but also change my body or my blood so that I am not in any way, shape or form related to them?" Rocking him gently as she thought about it, she racked her brain thinking about the possibilities and the risks. Finally looking down at him and smiling, she brushed her hand against his cheek. "Hi, there is a way, but just to let you know, there are risks associated with this procedure. The other thing you need to know is that we will need to do this soon, as this last attack is more than the healing ability I give you by being inside of you can handle." Taking a moment to think about what she had just said, his eyes widened as he realized that he was slowly dying. "I think I want to get Oji-san's opinion on this. Is there any way that we can bring him in here to meet you and talk to him about this?" Nodding her head, she winced as she thought about what he was going to need to do to make this happen. "Okay, first you are going to need to be awakened, so that you can let the Hokage know what he needs to do. It is going to hurt a lot, and you will need to focus on telling him that he will need to channel a little bit of chakra and put his fingertips on your forehead. I will do the rest from there, okay?" Quickly agreeing with her, he braced himself for the pain as she forced him awake. Hokage's office. While they were discussing some of the things that they would need to accomplish, an urgent knocking sounded at his office door. Motioning to Kakashi to open the door, the Hokage quickly released the privacy seals which allowed them to open the doors. An Anbu with a cat mask was standing at the door, anxiously waiting for them to open it, and once it was open she immediately bowed. "Hokage-sama, Naruto has awakened and even though he is in agony, begged us to come and get you. He said it's to do with his tenant." She hurried out of the way as the two occupants rushed out of the room for the hospital, both so stunned that they forgot about anything but moving as quickly as they could. At the hospital, moments later, the two men were standing in Naruto's room, eyes wide in shock at the amount of pain the young man was in. Kakashi walked closer and took the boy's hand in his own and squeezed it. Turning his head to see who was there, and seeing Kakashi and the Hokage, Naruto tried to grin and failed miserably. Looking from one to the other, he licked his lips as he struggled to talk. "Closer please, I'm dying, is still a chance, need to channel your chakra, touch my forehead, lot to discuss, please hurry." Quickly moving closer, they started to channel a tiny bit of chakra and touched their fingers to his head while they watched him bite back a scream of agony. As soon as they made contact with his skin, everything went black momentarily. Naruto's mindscape. They appeared in front of a cage in his mind and they gazed about momentarily in awe, before they focused on the voices they heard in front of them. "Please Yuki-chan, please make the pain go away. It's going to hurt worse before it gets better Naruto-kun, first we need to talk to the Hokage and Hataki-san." The voice they heard this time was feminine, low and melodic, which drew their attention. Walking forward towards the cage, the scene in front of them stunned them. As soon as they could see beyond the bars, they saw a young woman with stunning red hair cradling Naruto to her. He was lying there in her lap, his little body shaking from the pain, when they noticed her ears and tails. That was when their minds had to stop and reboot. Of the two of them, Kakashi was the first to recover. Kyūbi is a girl. Naruto groaned and glared at him for a moment. Her name is Miyuki, not Kyūbi. Kyūbi is a title. Nodding at the young man, they both sat down right next to the cage. The Hokage gently placed his hand on Naruto's head, and smoothed down his hair trying to give him some comfort. Naruto-kun, why did you need to talk to us? Shaking his head to clear his mind, Naruto opened his eyes to look at the Hokage. I know Oji-san, I know everything about Minato Tem and Kushina Baka. Their plan, the way they abandoned me, I know everything. What I need from you is for you to listen to Miyuki, because she has a way to not only save my life, but a way to make it so that they lose any and all say or control over my life. I will be able to receive a new bloodline, which would allow me to start my own clan, right Oji-san? Stunned beyond all belief, the two men stood there in silence as Miyuki told them briefly about her history with Konoha and what had happened that night when she had attacked. She also told them about the Kitsune summoning contract that she would have him sign, gaining Konoha a 6th summoning contract, and also about what would need to happen in order for him to survive the night. The two men were skeptical at first, but as they talked and discussed everything in depth they soon came to see that this seemed to be the only way to help Naruto out. Thinking about everything that they had talked about, the Hokage leaned back against the bars of the cage. Turning his head to look at the Kitsune, he realized that there were a couple of other matters that they needed to discuss. Miyuki, I only have a couple more questions for you. The first is, will he be able to choose his bloodline or will it be something totally at random? Secondly, have the two of you discussed any names, since I am quite sure that Naruto would prefer to distance himself as much as possible from them. Taking a moment to think about her answer very carefully, Miyuki sighed and shook her head to clear it. There is only so much manipulating I can do. Given that his chakra affinities are wind, water, and fire in that order, I can tweak his affinities to give him a Hyouten Kekkei Genkei using his wind and water affinities, a Futen Kekkei Genkei using his water and fire affinities, or even a Shikuten Kekkei Genkei using his wind and fire affinities. The only definite abilities that will be included are a remarkably fast healing ability combined with an extended lifespan and slowed aging, as well as enlarged chakra reserves and a new dojutsu. Both of the men there stared at her in shock, though Kakashi recovered faster. That more than anything will get the council's favor quicker than anything, though. Will it be a single stage like the Byakugan or an evolving one like the Sharingan? Smirking at their stunned faces, she chuckled lightly. It will be a single stage like the Byakugan, with 2 lesser abilities and 1 major. The first is that it will be able to cast some rather difficult to dispel genjutsu on a target, which is a huge plus for anyone like Naruto whose large reserves generally prevent the usage of genjutsu. The second is the ability to target an enemy, and attack them with either thrown weapons or ninjutsu and have them locked onto the target. What this means is if the target creates bunshin or they kawarimi with something or someone, the attack will follow them because it will lock onto their chakra signature. Both men whistled as they thought of the possibilities, when Hiruzen realized something. You said that there were 2 lesser and 1 major, and only described the 2 lesser abilities. Would it be too much trouble to ask about the final ability of his dojutsu? She smiled as she saw the grimace cross Kakashi's face. I will give you the general overview of this last ability. It is a bloodline key, meaning it can be used to unlock someone's bloodline ability, or seal it away either temporarily or permanently. Gasps were ripped from the throats of both men, as they began to fully realize the full scope of this new Kekkei Genkei. This is an amazing opportunity for you, Naruto. Have you decided on a new name and surname for yourself and your new clan? Naruto simply looked to the old man and gave him a small smile. After tonight my name will be known as Sojin Akari and our Kekkei Genkei will be known as the Cg no Namida, or the Tears of Justice. Pausing here he turned to look at Miyuki, and tilted his head a little. Nay, Yuki-chan, can you make my eyes a different color, like green? And make it so that when my dojutsu is active the only thing that changes is the shape of my pupil. At this point he was picturing it in his mind's eye, hoping that she would pick up on it. As he gazed up at her he watched as she giggled slightly and nodded at him. Can do, Naru-kun, but since we have agreed to get this done, I must ask a favor of both of you. I would like for you to push him in his training, which should start once I fix his body and he is out of the hospital. The biggest upset that I can think for those two is for them to come back and he is already a Jonaner in Anbu. Think you can make it happen in the next 7 years? The two older men looked at each other, smiled and turned back to Miyuki. Most definitely, Miyuki-san. Akari-kun, you will be working yourself into the ground if you want this to happen, understand? Nodding, he carefully stood and then walked towards the two men. Walking back through the bars, Akari hugged each of the men for a moment, thanking them profusely and asking them to thank Weasel and Cat for helping him as well. Turning back to walk into the cage, he stopped and tilted his head back to look at Sarutobi. Oji-san, we will give you approximately 5 minutes to set up the chakra containment seals. You will need to ensure that no one outside of this room will feel the procedure. Will that be long enough? Thinking about it for a moment, he nodded to them. Bowing to Miyuki, he smiled as he rose. Please take care of him, he is precious to me and I have much to atone for where he is concerned. Simply smiling at him in turn, she nodded once and then ejected them from his mindscape. She then turned to her container. Okay, Akari-kun, I need you to prepare yourself because as much as I might wish it otherwise, this is going to hurt you. What needs to happen is that you're going to rip as close to 1/3 of the seal off as is possible for you. This will allow enough of my chakra and intent out to repair the damage done to your body as well as overwrite your current bloodline. This will also have the side benefit of making it a dominant male trait, meaning that any children that you or any male descendants have will have your bloodline over any other bloodline ability that marries into your clan. Nodding as he walked over to her, he wrapped his arms around her. I'm a little nervous and worried, Yuki-chan. You promise that I'll be okay? Wrapping her arms around the little one, she squeezed him gently as she laid her cheek against his hair. I promise that not only will you be okay, but that all the pain you are going through will be worth it. Pulling him away from her for a moment, she smiled down at him, and motioned towards the seal on the bars. It's time, Akari-kun, please be careful and pull at it from this side so that I can catch you, okay? Taking a deep breath, he nodded at her and turned to walk towards the seal. He ripped off almost the perfect amount of the seal and turned towards Miyuki right before he passed out, as at that exact moment in time all he knew was pain. 3 days later, his eyes fluttered open as he woke, and he struggled to recall where he was and what had happened. As everything finally came back to him, his eyes shot wide open and he quickly shut them and went into his mindscape. As soon as he showed up there, he raced back to the room he wanted and stopped just in front of the cage. Frowning as he looked at it, he closed his eyes and willed the room to change to match his imagination. Shortly afterward, he opened his eyes and smiled widely as he took in the scene in front of him. Centered against the far wall of the bedroom was a king-sized bed with crimson silk sheets on it. The door on the left wall led to a rather spacious bath and onsen, while the door on the right wall led to a kitchen and small living area. He stuck his head out the front door and there was a small clearing next to a lake, with a forest that seemed to stretch for miles. Smiling brightly, Akari walked back to the bedroom and sat down next to Miyuki. Gently shaking her shoulder, he woke her up and sat back a bit as she snapped upright and looked around, blinking in a confused manner. As he took in her state of confusion, he noticed that she had on a leather choker with the kanji for seal engraved on it. Nay, Yuki-chan, what do you think of my new and improved mindscape? Staring up at him, she squealed and glomped onto him. Akari-kun, this is amazing. I have to say though, have you looked in the mirror since you woke up? You look totally different. Hearing that, he tore out of the room and into the bathroom, where he stood there stunned for a few minutes. He was a little over 4 feet tall now, and definitely looking healthier. His hair was straight and smooth, unlike before, and it was black with some red highlights. The eyes were no longer the cobalt blue that they were before, but were a deep and vivid emerald green. The biggest change though was his face, as it was more rounded than before, and his whisker marks were far less pronounced. Following along behind him, Miyuki had watched as he took in all the changes to his body. Smiling ever so slightly, she walked up behind him and gently embraced him from behind. You like what I did? Nodding rapidly was the only response she got, since he was rather speechless at this point in time. I think you'll like what I did as far as your bloodline abilities as well, Akari-kun. You now have both the Hyouten as well as the Shikuden Kekkei Genkei, and when you channel chakra to your eyes, your pupils will change to a silver cross shape. In the next instant she was nearly bowled over by the young boy as he had whirled around and thrown his arms around her. She merely held him as he sobbed tears of joy. It was cruel beyond measure what his parents had done to him, and he finally had the love and care that he should have had from the very beginning. A few minutes later he stepped back and smiled at her, while wiping his tears away. "Thank you so much for everything you have done for me. I just wanted to know if I could call you Ka-san." Shocked beyond belief at what he had just asked, she simply nodded and slowly started smiling. "If you want to, you can call me your Ka-san. Can I ask why though?" His head to one side, he gave her a small foxy grin. "Because of you I have been reborn. I have been given opportunities that I never would have otherwise. Then there's the fact that you have always been there for me, healing me and taking care of me like a mother would." Wrapping her arms around him, she smiled and closed her eyes. "I promise you that you will never be alone again. Now there is one more thing we need to accomplish before you wake up from here, and that is getting you signed up as the summoner for the Kitsune clan." Shifting her body so that he could watch what she was doing, she slowly ran through the hand seals that were required for any summoning and explained all this to Akari. Once the contract had appeared, she instructed him to bite his thumb and place his handprint on the scroll along with his name signed in blood. They both watched as the scroll disappeared and then walked outside. "I will help you in whatever way that I can. Most of it will be when I feel you're ready to actively use your dojutsu though. Although I will say that you can show them what it looks like when they ask you. One thing you must never do though is use your eyes abilities against someone who has a larger chakra reserve than you do, as it will literally backfire on you. It will only be a temporary effect, but it will happen." She looked at him seriously while waiting for his response, which was a rather rapidly given nod of affirmation. Grabbing him into one last hug, Miyuki squeezed him one last time and then held him at arm's length. "Go ahead and go, Akari. Both of them are out there waiting for you to wake up." He simply nodded at her and focused on leaving the mindscape, smiling gently at her as he disappeared. Back in the hospital room, yawning slightly as he opened his eyes, he slowly sat up and stretched, smiling up at the four people who stood around his bed. "Oji-san, Weasel-san, Dog-san, Cat-san, good morning, it is morning right?" Slipping around to hug him, Sarutobi Hiruzen smiled as he nodded at the young boy. "Hi, it is morning Akari-kun. How are you feeling this morning?" "Great Oji-san, now if I could just get out of here I would be almost perfect." Gentle laughter greeted him as he spoke, causing him to smile brightly up at everyone. "Nay, Oji-san, would you like to see my new dojutsu?" Two gasps broke the silence that followed. The Hokage glared at the two who had made noise and cleared his throat. "I expect you to keep silent on this, you two." The Kyūbi confirmed for us that the Biju are the source of a great many bloodlines, if not all of them, and because of the way he was injured several nights ago, the Kyūbi no Kitsune was gracious enough to give him a new bloodline including a never-before-seen dojutsu. He paused here and smirking slightly, chuckled at the look of surprise on Akari's face. "It's already active. I thought it would be some time before it could be activated." Shaking his head at the older man, he smirked back at him. "Nope. Apparently the dojutsu will be activated when our ability to use chakra is unlocked. Take a peek if you want." Here he closed his eyes for a moment to focus a bit of his chakra to his eyes, and as he opened them back up he looked at each of them in the room and chuckled mentally at the looks in their eyes. All four of the others in the room were shocked beyond belief at the sight in front of them. His once blue eyes were a brilliant and piercing green, and with his dojutsu active, his once round black pupil changed into a brilliant silver Maltese-style cross. Glaring with it active, he sat up straight in the bed. "From this day forward, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto is dead. I have been reborn as Sojin Akari, and my clan's abilities and Kekkei Genkei are to be held a secret until the Hokage, and I deem it time to reveal some but not all of the abilities." Hiruzen chuckled softly as he nodded in agreement. "Well said Akari-kun, very well said. I can foresee you becoming a very capable clan head and leader in the future. Gather around and I will explain what I'm allowed to about what could become one of the most powerful clans and bloodlines here in Konoha." He was exhausted. All of his teachers were there along with the members of the Shinobi Council, as well as the current Anbu commander, and they were currently judging his abilities and whether he was worthy of the leaf hit I ate. Thinking back over the last 3 years made him smile, as he recalled all the good times that they had shared and all that they had taught him as well as everything he had learned on his own. The first year had been brutal, as they had pushed him to the extreme, just in getting his body conditioned as well as getting his chakra control to where it needed to be. Flashback begins. Guy-sensei was in a league of his own when it came to conditioning his body, especially when it came to learning taijutsu. He had spent most of that first year constantly adjusting his chakra weights, since having Miyuki sealed inside of him, as well as having a nearly inhuman healing rate to boot, meant that his muscles and bones were healing up overnight. Once the green-clad man had learned this, he was ecstatic and gave him full-body workouts every other day. On the days they weren't working out, Akari was learning the stances and moves of the Goken, or strong fist taijutsu style. The biggest reason behind him learning this was because Miyuki had insisted that the moves were quite similar to the Genso no Ken, or Fist of the Elements style. His second year with Guy-sensei was quite similar to the first with two major differences. The first was that his chakra weights had the limiters reduced, meaning he was working out with far more weight added than before. The other was that he was beginning to learn the differences between the two stances, and training in the Genso no Ken. He wasn't allowed to add in any of his elemental natures, as both his sensei had wanted him to get the moves of his chosen style nearly flawless before adding anything to it. By the time he was finished with this year of training in taijutsu, he was wearing 500 pounds of weights, which was absolutely stellar for a boy of his age. By the time his third year began, Guy-sensei and Miyuki had determined that he was ready for the next step and had begun an extreme regimen as far as his taijutsu style was concerned. The first 4 months had been learning to add his water nature chakra to his body while sparring. They quickly learned that his natural grace and agility while fighting increased exponentially when utilizing this type of chakra. The other thing that they noticed is that his hits were as hard and unforgiving as a tsunami when he was attacking, or as gentle and deceptive as a stream when he was dodging or redirecting his opponent's strikes. The next 4 months were devoted to learning how to channel the fire nature chakra, and they quickly realized that his form while using this part of his chakra that his moves were an all-out offense. Also was that his aggressive side became more focused and intense, just like a fire. In fact, Guy-sensei mentioned in passing that this part of the style reflected the fires of his soul. The last 4 months were spent in learning the most difficult part of his style, learning how to harness the power of his wind nature chakra. They spent almost the entire first 2 months figuring out how to channel it, and once they did, they rapidly figured out that he was going to be absolutely lethal once he had managed to mix his chakra natures in this taijutsu style. When he was channeling wind chakra through his body, his speed increased quite a bit, and depending on how he held his hands, he could hit with the blunt force of a hurricane, or the gentle yet sharp force of a scalpel. Then there was Yugo-sensei who trained him in Kenjutsu. They spent the first day alone trying to find him the right weapon or weapons, and finally decided on a pair of chakra-conducting kodachi. The first year was spent entirely on learning how to go through the katas of his stance, Kitsuneteru no Odori, or the dance of the fox tails. Fortunately for Akari, the purple-haired kunoichi had a photographic memory, which was quite useful in learning the katas, stances and attacks of this sword style, seeing as how she had to enter his mindscape to learn it directly from Miyuki. They then spent that first year learning the basics of his style, going over them over and over again, to ensure that he had them committed to his muscle memory. From there they moved on to sparring with weighted wooden rods, which was quite enjoyable for the both of them. By the time the first year had passed, she had judged him ready to move on to the next step. The second year was all about ensuring that he was ready to start wielding his blades, and thus they moved on to weighted metal rods that were twice the weight of the wooden ones. After 6 months of this, they had started teaching him the proper way to care for his blades as they started to incorporate them more and more into his training and even into sparring. The third year was spent exclusively in training him how to channel his chakra into the blades. They followed a similar training schedule as Guy-sensei did, starting with water, then moving on to fire and ending with wind. By the time they were done with this third year of training, Yugo-sensei had taught him everything she knew, and told him that he needed to continue to train and get experience, and to keep expanding on the training that he was already doing. His Oji-san got in on the training as well. In that first year was teaching him manners, the clan laws of Konoha, as well as teaching him how to write more neatly as a precursor to teaching him the art of fuinjutsu. The old man was quite apt in his manner of teaching, and by the time he was finished with the first year of training with the Hokage, he was well on his way to becoming a fuinjutsu adept. The second year continued on much like the first, only they added the other laws of Konoha, as well as getting into politics and diplomacy. It was at this point in time that they brought Hyuga Hiyashi and Nara Shikaku in on the secret, and they began to share their experience with the young boy as well. It was at the end of this second year of training that Akari was attested in his fuinjutsu skills, and was rated somewhere above the level of an adept in his ability to understand, create and even modify seals. The third year was much tougher as they only added more material on top of what he was already being trained in. Against his better judgment, the Hokage had him involved in the Uchiha incident. The way he had thought of to resolve it was nothing short of remarkable, as he had managed to get rid of the problem and was able to keep one of his sensei from having to become a nuke nin. The way he had come up with was that since one of the clans was about rise up in an attempt to overthrow the Hokage, that they apply one of the older laws that was still applicable in this situation. Since they had an inside person to give them the details, they had the Anbu go in and crash one of the clan meetings. Once inside, they were able to incapacitate all those who were guilty, and brought them to Moreno Ibiki and Yamanaka Inoichi to interrogate and prove their guilt without a shadow of a doubt. Once they had separated the innocent from the truly guilty, they then held their trials and executions in public. Other than that whole mess, the third year moved along much like the previous two, with him becoming more like the clan head he would need to be. This was the year where they added the history of the clans as well as the history of Konoha on top of refining his abilities in fuinjutsu. When they tested him at the end of the year, they were amazed to see his abilities were somewhere around the level of a master. The seals and the way they just seemed to flow from his brush were almost on par with his abilities in genjutsu, just simply beyond belief. What they didn't know, however, was that the reason why his abilities in fuinjutsu were growing so remarkably was due to his use of the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, or the shadow clone technique. Every night before he went to sleep he created as many clones as possible just to work on his chakra control and fuinjutsu abilities. The first year he had been making 150 clones each night, putting 50 of them to work on various methods of chakra control, another 50 on practicing the strokes he would need to be able to actually write the seals, and the final 50 would read up on various seals and sealing methods. In the hours before he would wake up he would have them dispel in groups of 25 in 10-minute intervals so that he didn't end up getting hurt as he filed away what they had accomplished and learned from their experience. The second year he had bumped it up to 300 clones, and divided them into 4 sections. A fourth of them would be reading up on the creation and usage of seal tags of all kinds. Another quarter of them would be taking the time to learn how to create and modify jutsu, with another fourth experimenting with different types of seal tags, and the final quarter working hard on chakra control as well as his abilities with his dojutsu. The third year he had doubled the number of clones yet again, only this time he divided the workload differently. He sent 100 clones to work on his chakra control, another 100 to read up on the next level of seal creation and modification, the third group of 100 clones he had experimenting with the Hyouden bloodline, the fourth group was doing the same with his Shikuden bloodline, and the fifth group was busy learning how to master the jutsu he already knew. The sixth and final group was divided into 2 parts, 50 clones that were practicing the fuinjutsu that he already knew and the remaining 50 were working on refining his control of his abilities with his dojutsu. It was only because of his massive chakra reserves that he was able to utilize this unique way of training. The training he was able to conduct in this manner gave him many years' worth of training in a very short amount of time. The last 2 trainers he had worked together with him in the areas that they worked on with him were the arts of ninjutsu, genjutsu, and the use of his dojutsu. It went without saying that Itachi-sensei and Kakashi-sensei were the 2 most suited for these 3 areas of training, and they consistently overlapped in their training in these arts. The first year they mostly worked on the basics, with Itachi helping him to train his dojutsu so that he wasn't using so much chakra in activating it. They drilled over and over again in his usage of the Seiji no Namida, so that when he chose to activate it, it only took a fraction of a second to activate and use, and he used a very meager portion of his chakra to do so. Meanwhile Kakashi-sensei was training him in the use of hand seals, and often had Akari doing speed drills with them so that he could maximize the number of jutsu he could use in any given situation, as well as ensuring that he was confident enough with them to be able to focus on the amount of chakra he was molding instead of having to be concerned over whether he was able to make the hand seals correctly. The second year was much the same, only Itachi had decided to focus solely on genjutsu and dojutsu training. This year was spent learning about the different types and ranks of genjutsu as well as casting them on him to ensure that he understood how they worked. The only downside to this method of teaching was the fact that there was apparently a defense mechanism built into his dojutsu that detected when a genjutsu had been cast on him and automatically allowed him to either spike or cycle his chakra to dispel it. They ended up having to have Akari form the genjutsu over Itachi instead, and once it had been dispelled he was graded on how well he had done. On the other hand, Kakashi had been having a much easier time of training the boy in ninjutsu as he was a very quick learner when it came to hands-on training. The academy's 3 jutsu were learned in a day, and he quickly set out to learn as much as he could in making the greatest use of the ninjutsu he learned. The first 3 elemental jutsu that he learned were all D rank, and they were Suiden, Mizudan, Kaden, Hinotama, and Fuden, K's Dongan. By the time the year was done he could honestly say that he had learned a lot from Kakashi-sensei, as he had learned how to moderate the amount of chakra he poured through the seals and could charge the first 3 jutsu that he had learned with enough chakra to take them from D rank to high C rank in both range and damage. Year 3 was by far the most interesting training for the boy, as he truly exploded in his capabilities with his dojutsu and genjutsu. Itachi was extremely grateful for what he had done for his clan as well as for the village, so grateful in fact, that he had spoken with the Hokage about arranging a betrothal between Akari and one of the young girls in his clan. They debated it fiercely for a few months before deciding that they would allow the young clan head a choice in whether it went through or not. By the end of the year, Akari knew at least 2 genjutsu each of D rank, C rank, B rank and A rank. He could cast them quickly and was able to layer 4 genjutsu on a target as soon as he made eye contact. The best thing is that it always took 2 separate methods to break out of his genjutsu as long as they were cast with his dojutsu. The time that he had spent with Kakashi-sensei had paid off dividends in his abilities in combat. The third year had been when he had learned about collaboration jutsu, like water and lightning or wind and fire. The fact that he was able to create a few B and C rank jutsu for his affinities as well as his 2 bloodline abilities was nothing short of spectacular. Flashback ends. Wincing as he stretched out his sore and aching muscles, the 8-year-old boy took a few more minutes to stretch his body out as it had been quite the rigorous workout. He had started at 8 this morning with the spar from hell with Guy-sensei, then after a 20-minute break, he had matched swords with Yugo-sensei. By that time it had already gotten close to lunchtime, and so they had stopped there and eaten before continuing on. Immediately following lunch had been Itachi, who had had to make a couple of clones for him to test his dojutsu and genjutsu on. The one who had really put him through the ringer though had been his Aniki, Kakashi-sensei. That had been an hour-long spar from the very lowest depths of hell, and the only reason he hadn't won had been because of his lack of experience. Finally he shook his head and stood tall, as he had nothing to be ashamed of and everything to be proud of at this point in time. Walking forward to where everyone was gathered around the Hokage, where he waited until they were done talking and he had their attention. Bowing low to the Hokage, he held it for a moment and then stood slowly. I trust that my abilities are sufficient for me to wear the Hitai of the leaf and bear it with pride, Hokage-sama. With a twinkle in his eye, he nodded and motioned for everyone there to take a seat. Smiling in gratitude to the old man, Akari carefully sat Caesar across from the shinobi council. Directing his gaze to the Hokage, he waited patiently for the eldest ninja of the village to speak. Akari-kun, it is indeed a pleasure to see how far you have come, and to get an idea for just how far you will go. I would like to take this time to get a feel for what your full capabilities are, and thus will turn the floor over for any questions from the council to either you or your teachers. Hiruzen then turned and looked to his left and then to his right and nodded. The first person to speak was Hyuga Hiyashi. Sojin-san, the dojutsu that you have, what exactly are its capabilities? Taking a moment to gather his thoughts, he quietly responded. Hyuga-sama, The CG no Namida enables me to layer multiple genjutsu on any target with just a glance, and they require 2 or more different methods or attempts to dispel dependent on the strength of the person they were cast on. Once activated, they allow me to know almost instantly whether I have been subjected to genjutsu or if someone is currently attempting to attack me by using one against me. They also allow me to target someone by attaching an ultra-thin chakra string on mental command so that my jutsu will track them if they attempt to dodge or kawari me out of the way. Pausing for a moment, he cleared his throat and continued. The ultimate ability of my dojutsu is the ability to sense if someone I am looking at has a kekkei genkei, and either unlock it, if they haven't already unlocked their ability, or to lock it away either temporarily or permanently. There is a weakness or two, but those shall remain as they are, known only to me. No disrespect intended, Hyuga-sama. Nodding at his answer, Hiyashi sat back and pondered on what he had been told. The next person to speak was Nara Shikaku. Hitaki-san, in your honest opinion, based on what you and your fellow nin have observed over the last 3 years, where would you rate his abilities? Taking a step forward and placing his hands directly on Akari's shoulders, he carefully squeezed them briefly before responding. In all honesty, Shikaku, I can only rate him on what I have seen, so there will need to be an answer on part of his training from the Hokage as well. I will give you a rundown on what we do know about his skills and abilities. Sojin Akari is a close to mid-range fighter, who excels at kenjutsu and genjutsu. I would rate his taijutsu at high chunin, his kenjutsu at high jonin, and his genjutsu at high jonin to low anbu level. His ninjutsu, I would have to say, is definitely at high jonin, especially since a number of his attacks that he used earlier today were created by him, since we have very few if any jutsu that have ever been used by either Hyouten or Shikuden bloodline bearers. Here he paused and gathered his thoughts once more before continuing. His capacity for stealth is definitely at anbu level, his chakra control is also at anbu level, and he currently has solid jonin level reserves. I will defer to the Hokage's judgment in announcing the rest of his abilities. All eyes turned to the Hokage, who took a deep drag from his pipe before responding. Due to the fact that our only Fuinjutsu masters are currently away, I have been personally instructing young Akari-kun in the art. A lot of where he has learned has been in self-study from scrolls and other writings, and I would rate him somewhere above an adept in level. That is the best assessment I can offer at this time due to the fact that he has surpassed me in the creation and modification of seals a while ago. Akari remained calm on the outside, but he was bouncing around like a little kid on the inside at his Oji-san and Aniki's answers to the question. Glancing around at the gathered clan heads as well as the Anbu commander, he sighed mentally as he waited for any more questions. They all appeared to be discussing the answers for a minute or two before Yamanaka Inoichi cleared his throat. In your own words, what rank would you see him attaining today, and I would like for each of you to answer for yourselves. Gai-sensei immediately leapt forward and bowed. Honored council members, I feel that our most youthful student is most deserving of the rank of Chunin, at least until he has more experience under his belt. I personally feel that it would be a grave mistake to just make him a genin when he is fully capable of the most youthful teamwork I have seen in anyone in a long time. Here he bowed once more and stepped back. The next person to step forward was Yugo-sensei. I would agree with Gai-san in his assessment. Akari-kun not only has the drive to improve himself, but to help others around him to improve and grow as well. I have learned a great deal from him in the last 3 years, almost as much as I have taught him, and I feel that he should receive the rank of Chunin. As she took a step back, Itachi-sensei stepped forward. I concur with my comrade's previous statements. I feel that he not only has the ability but the mentality to handle the rank. I would ask that he be assigned to a team that is shy a person, so that way he can gain the experience he needs to grow and progress. Once he was done, he took a step back and Kakashi cleared his throat. I would make the same recommendation, but with the option to be picked up by the Anbu once he has been blooded. Here he paused as he felt Akari's gulp through his hands and he squeezed his shoulders gently once more before continuing. His character is without reproach, especially considering how ill-treated he was before we took over raising and training him 3 years ago. He is loyal, hardworking, and has a do or die mentality that will see to having both the mission accomplished as well as his entire team returning with him one way or another. Kakashi stopped there and stepped back amongst his other comrades. The Anbu commander tilted his head in acknowledgement and acceptance of his statement, and then looked to the Hokage and nodded in response. Tilting his head forward for a moment, Sarutobi Hiruzen hid the tears of pride as he blinked them away. The fact that Akari had come so far in such a short amount of time meant a lot to him. Looking back up at Akari, he cleared his throat before speaking. Having heard the assessment today, I must say that I am very proud of you, Akari-kun. You have persevered when many others would have given up. You have struggled and fought your way through a training regimen that many your age or even a little older than you would consider insane, and you not only passed your final exam, you have completely obliterated any and all expectations that there could have been for you. Now if there are no objections, he paused here for a moment, and looked at each face there only to see approval. It is my pleasure to congratulate you and say that you have earned this. Rise and accept your Hitai and best, Chunin Sojin. Blinking back tears of gratitude, he bowed low to the ground before rising to his feet and shakily moving forward to pick up the items that the Hokage had set in front of him. Throwing the vest on, and then wrapping the headband around his right bicep and tying it off, he returned to where he had been sitting and stood there, turning to face the council once more. Smiling broadly at the young boy before him, Sarutobi stood and looked around at everyone there before speaking up once more. It has been more years than I can remember since we have seen the establishment of a new clan. I have received a request from Uchiha Itachi, the current head of the Uchiha clan, for the creation of the Sojin clan, with himself as a sponsor. According to the laws of Konoha, the only people who have any say in the creation or addition of a new clan are the Hokage as well as the other clan heads. Turning to Akari, he smiled once more. Akari-kun, if this request is accepted and passes, until you turn 16 or become a Jonin you will need to have someone who will represent your clan in council meetings. Do you have anyone in mind that would be able to do this for you? Getting a nod from the young man in question, Hiruzen turned his attention once more to the council members in front of him. Anyone have any reason why this request cannot be accepted? Aside from the fact that there is only the one member for now, that is. Seeing that no one there seemed to have any objections, he smirked as he turned back to face Akari. Chunin Sojin, upon unanimous decision of the council, you and your family are now a clan of Konoha. Seeing as there is only yourself and no one else, we will need to initiate the Clan Restoration Act. You will need to find a minimum of 3 women and be married by your 16th birthday to at least one of them. Is that understood? Grumbling mentally about this, Akari nodded. Hi Hokage-sama, I do have one question though. It is acceptable that I have the final say in the matter of my marriages, and that they are not to be forced or coerced, is that correct? Getting a nod and a soft smile in response, he sighed in relief. Taking a deep breath, he turned and faced his teachers. Yugo-sensei, Onezen, would you do me the honor of accepting the role of being my clan's representative on the council until I either come of age or achieve the desired rank? Stunned beyond belief, it took her a moment to respond. Smiling at her honorary Odoto, she nodded to him. Hi, Odoto, it would be an honor to assist you. I appreciate your trust in me, and will never give you cause to doubt me. Turning back to the council he smiled and bowed. Thank you for supporting me in this. I am eternally grateful to my teachers as well as each of you for all that you have done for me. I await your orders, Hokage-sama. Looking through the papers in front of him, he shuffled through them looking for the right one. Finding it, he cleared his throat before reading from the sheet. Chunin Sojin, you are to report to your team's training ground, which is Training Field 18, in the morning at 8 a.m. Your new team is Chunin Inuzuka Hitomi, Chunin Aburame Takehito and Jonin Sensei Yasumasa Habara. Any questions? Shaking his head, Akari smiled internally. Things had been going great for him and he was finally starting to reach some of his goals. Blinking as he looked around at everyone standing there, he was a little surprised at seeing Itachi-sensei approach him. Sojin-san, it is an honor to have helped you to get here, having achieved 2 of your dreams this day. I have with me a request, which will help both you and a member of my clan. I would ask that you hear me out and think about it before responding if you would. A single nod of Akari's head was his response. Pulling out a scroll from one of his pouches, Itachi handed it to the boy. In here is a betrothal agreement between the Uchiha and Sojin clans. All it needs is both of our signatures as well as your designated clan representative. I know how you feel about arranged marriages, Akari-kun, but I ask that you give her a chance and see where things go. You will have until your 15th birthday to choose whether to finalize said contract once it has been signed, and the only requirement that there is that the both of you spend time together and get to know each other. Deep in thought at the moment, Akari gently weighed the scroll in his hand. Unlike his former family, Itachi was giving him a choice in the matter, which was a huge plus for him. Also there was the fact that he had absolutely no respect for the Namikaze or Uzumaki clan heads, but he had quite a bit for Itachi, which also weighed heavily in favor of him accepting the contract. Removing the binding around it, he quickly scanned the document to see if there was a name listed, and was stunned by the name he found there. Looking up at Itachi, he nodded at the man. I must admit to being a little stunned at name listed here, to be perfectly honest. Setsuki-san was one of the only children I know that would play with me before my change. Is she aware of anything to do with me? Shaking his head at the youth's question, Itachi mentally sighed with relief as it seemed that he was leaning towards accepting the contract, which would be largely beneficial to her since her only remaining relative was an older brother who had been an eager participant in the attempted coup, and had been executed with the rest of the traitors. This would give her a fresh start, and would bring her out of the depression she had been in ever since. By the same token, with the dowry that he and his mother had decided to put into the contract, which was a considerable sum along with a rather large house and property to help the young clan out, there was very little reason he could think of to deny the contract. Deep in thought himself, Akari had pretty much noted many of the same things that Itachi just had, and sighed aloud. Turning to Yugo as he re-rolled the scroll, he bowed his head and spoke. Onezen, I'm inclined to agree, but I bow to your wisdom in the matter. Having given it some thought and glancing over the terms, they are being quite generous in helping our new clan in our humble beginnings. He then stood and smiled at her for a moment before becoming serious once more. However, here he looked to Itachi and the Hokage with determination in his eyes. I must insist that if we agree to the betrothal that she is informed of who I used to be, what I contain, and who my former family is. I also beg of you to consider her desires in this, and if she doesn't want to go through with this for good reason, that we let the matter end there. Is this acceptable? Taking a moment to look at Akari, he nodded and smiled softly. I don't think she'll have any problems with it. That and the house and property sit on land that is on the edge of the Uchiha and Hyuga clan lands, so you will have more than enough room to grow. Tilting his head in thought for a moment, Akari smiled. Perhaps we could discuss this over dinner tonight. Itachi looked to Yugo, who simply shrugged and nodded. Turning his gaze back to Akari, he nodded as well. That would be acceptable, Akari-kun. Shall we say 6:30 this evening? Returning Itachi's gaze for the moment, Akari smiled and nodded. Arigato, and that is indeed an acceptable time. He then bowed to everyone present, turned to the Hokage and looked at him with a questioning gaze. Receiving a nod from the older man, he turned and approached Yugo and walked away talking with her, leaving the council to chuckle at his departure. Walking up to the two men standing together, Hiashi chuckled slightly as he nodded at the young boy who had just left. Hiruzen, Itachi, something tells me that that youth is going to go places, yes. Nodding his head in agreement, the Hokage simply laughed as he watched the departing group of ninja. Itachi, something tells me that it might be a wise idea for me to be available later on this evening, because I am almost positive that your two clans will become quite close in the coming years. I agree, Hokage-sama, I totally agree. Turning in for the night, Akari sighed in relief. The past 2 years had been most beneficial for him in multiple ways. The first was that his first meeting with his former family had possibly been pushed back another 3 years. The main reason for that being that they had improved the academy's curriculum due to quite a few injuries and deaths that could have been prevented had the genin actually received more in-depth training than just the basic techniques that were covered, as well as ensuring that the trainees were physically fit. That had increased the graduation age from 12 to 13, and then there was the mandatory time as a genin before being able to go to the chunin exams that the council had established, which meant that there was a 2-year time requirement to be able to go from genin to chunin. Due to this delay in graduation, as well as the time requirement, there was a small possibility it had pushed the confrontation with his former relatives from when he was 12 to 15, and with the test he had undergone earlier today in trying to join the Anbu, he was certain that by the time he actually had the confrontation with his former family that he would be a Jonin and be firmly entrenched as a clan head. While he was fairly certain that he did well enough to pass, he was still concerned because his age might be the one factor in him not being accepted. That, and he was concerned about the possibility of his ex-relatives coming back earlier to ensure that their daughters were made genin. Then there was the new house that he had been living in for the last year and a half. He had been pleasantly surprised by the reaction he had received from Setsuki, and that had been the deciding factor in choosing to sign the contract. Flashback start. The dinner had been amazing, but Akari could already tell that something was worrying Setsuki, and he knew that he wasn't the only one to pick up on it. Once dinner was over, the conversation slowly became heavier, as both Itachi and Makoto, his mother and chief advisor in his role as the Uchiha clan head, directed the conversation toward why everyone was there this evening. Eventually, the Uchiha matriarch smiled and cleared her throat. Setsuki-chan, there are multiple reasons for why we are all gathered here tonight. The first is to clear up the mystery concerning one of your dearest friends, one Uzumaki Naruto. I promised you when you were much younger that I would help you to find him or find out what happened to him, and I am happy to tell you that he is alive and well, even if he has changed more than you might have expected. Sitting up straight with a small smile on her face, the first one that anyone had seen on the 7-year-old's face in quite some time, she looked expectantly at her Oba-san. I had hoped so, Oba-san. Where has he been all this time? What happened to him? When will I see him again, or has he forgotten all about me? Right as she stood to run to her room, her hands over her face, she was wrapped up in a hug from behind her. Then she heard a familiar voice in her ear. Suki-chan, I never forgot you, I promise you that. I had to get strong though, because I found out some rather disturbing things about my family, and because of certain things that you will be made aware of tonight, I had to train in secret for the last 3 years. I know that I owe you an explanation at the very least, and I promise you that I will give it to you. Believe it. Hearing those two very familiar words, she spun around and looked the person who was holding her, and since his eyes were closed she peered closely at his face, tracing the faint lines of the whiskers on his cheeks with her eyes. Wrapping her arms tightly around him, she buried her face in his neck while crying softly. He had maneuvered her carefully, and sitting back in her chair, Akari had placed her in his lap and rocked her as he comforted her. Before they left that night, he had told everyone there everything, and had even Sasuke and Makoto stunned by the level of betrayal that had happened to him. None of them batted an eye when he told them that he was the container of the Kyūbi no Kitsune, although all 3 women present crowed about how the most powerful demon lord was a female. What she was stunned about though was the fact that Miyuki Ka-san had changed his body so that not only was he not related to his former family anymore, but that he had been given a new bloodline and was the beginning of a whole new clan as well. Setsuki thought about whether she would be allowed to marry him, and was a little put out about the fact that she would have to share him. What do you mean that I will have to share you if I want this? Smiling at her gently, he placed a finger to her lips. Suki-chan, can you share me? I want you to know that I will consider us all as equals under our roof. Only in public will I appear to greater, and that is only because I will be the head of our clan. In any important decision you and the others, whoever they might be, will have an equal say in what we choose. Can you accept this? Pouting cutely at him, she turned and thought about it for a few minutes. On the one hand, she knew that he would have to have at least 3 wives. She knew what kind of person he was, and knew that growing up he had had very little love and affection in his life, but amazingly enough he still had a big heart, and she knew that she wouldn't be loved or cared for any less than the others. Setsuki was also very grateful that she wouldn't have to be a trophy wife, someone who was only kept around for her looks and to pop out babies. As she tossed the idea around, Akari was quietly carrying on conversation with his host and his family. They covered just about any topic you could think of, from his training regimen, to the ideas he had for getting back at certain people for just foolishly abandoning him. After a few more minutes she squeezed him gently to let him know that she had made her decision. Gulping slightly at the attention on her, she cleared her throat afterwards so that she could speak. I accept the proposal. I know Akari-kun would never treat anyone precious to him badly, and to be honest I think I'd like the opportunity to grow together with him over the next few years, so that we can get to know each other better. Flashback end. In fact, the house had needed so much work done, that it was better off being torn down and rebuilt. He and Itachi had come to an agreement that they would match every single ryo that he put into the new building, and that was mainly due to the fact that they figured that he wouldn't be bringing in all that much until he gained more rank and was able to take on harder missions. What they still didn't know is that he had his clones steadily making sealing scrolls and explosive tags on the side, and that he was making around 15,000 ryo each month above and beyond what he was making with missions. It was part of the reason why they had managed to have a new house built so quickly, and with all the extra cash he had coming in he had personally commissioned a few extras, like the mixed bathing onsen, the training dojo, and a flower garden with a pond. Laying there in bed as he prepared to go to sleep, the youth sat there and mentally estimated how much he had saved up over the last 2 years and whistled quietly as he figured he had saved up almost 500,000 ryo in the last 2 years, and that wasn't counting interest earned either. Smiling to himself as he fell asleep, he knew well that his future family wouldn't suffer the way he had growing up. The next day, Akari had awakened much refreshed this morning, showered and gotten dressed in his standard clothes. Black Anbu pants with pockets running down the legs, a sleeveless mesh undershirt with a dark green long sleeve shirt over it with his black chunin vest over the top. He tied his hitai around his left bicep and laced up his black steel-toed boots. Walking downstairs he greeted the elderly housekeeper that he had hired on as soon as the house was complete. "Ohayo Mika-san, how are you this morning?" She turned as she finished with breakfast and smiled at the young man. "Ohayo Akari-kun, I am just fine, and how did you sleep last night?" Grinning widely, Akari chuckled. "I slept quite well, thanks. Training does wonders for ensuring that one sleeps well at night. Is there anything we are in need of that I can get for you while I am out and about today?" Shaking her head, she slid a plate with eggs and toast in front of the young man. "No, we are good for now. You do remember that you have a meeting in half an hour at the Hokage's office, yes?" Nodding absent-mindedly, he grinned as he felt that he had indeed passed the test he needed to in order to join the ranks of the Anbu. It was then that he thought of a way to celebrate his passing the test. "Mika-san, if it's not too much of a hassle, can I ask you for a favor today?" Getting a nod from her, he grinned as he finished the last of his food and swallowed. "I was wondering if I could persuade you to pick up something extra special for dinner tonight, enough for 8 people. Nodding as she took the plate from his place at the head of the table, she paused for a moment. "Something fancy, Akari-kun?" Shaking his head for her to see, he stood and prepared to walk out the door. "Nothing too fancy. I would like to sit down and have a family dinner with all those whom I consider my family who will be available tonight. And by the way, that includes you as well, Mika-san." With a quick hug and a wink, he quickly ran out the door, hearing her chuckles as he did so. The Hokage's office. Arriving about 5 minutes later, the young man knocked on the doors to Oji-san's office and opened them once he had heard someone tell him to enter. Walking inside, he kept his eyes focused on the Hokage, all the while taking everyone that was around him, whether they could be seen or only sensed. Bowing to the Hokage, he stood once more, his face set in serious tones. "Chunin Sojin reporting as ordered, Hokage-sama." Standing from behind his desk, he went through a couple of hand seals and activated the improved privacy seals in his office. Once he was done with that, he turned to all the others who were in his office and motioned for them to drop their masks. Cat turned out to be Yugo, Dog was Kakashi, Weasel was Itachi, and the Anbu commander, otherwise known as Wolf, was Hyuga Hana. Clearing his throat to get everyone's attention, the Hokage began to speak. "Sojin-san, you have been called here today to join the ranks of the Anbu. You will be joining the Anbu Black Ops Squad, under the command of Hitaki Kakashi, and whose members are as follows: Weasel, who is their long-range combat specialist and interrogator, and Cat, who is the team's assassination and close combat specialist. There are 3 masks that you can choose from here, and they are the Hawk, Boar, and Fox masks. Once you have chosen your mask, then we will ask you to take off your shirt to receive your tattoo, which will designate you as an Anbu." Standing and approaching the desk, Akari looked over the masks that were there and quickly picked up the fox mask. Taking it in hand and stepping back, he looked to his Aniki and handed him his Chunin vest and mask with a nod, and then stripped off his Hittite and his long-sleeved shirt. Sitting in Caesar in front of the Hokage, he looked up at the old man with a smile on his face. "I'm ready, Hokage-sama." Smiling down at the young man, he then turned to Yugo and Hana, who were the tattoo specialists in the Anbu, and motioned them forward. Yugo looked down at her Ototo and smiled widely. "You have come a long way, Ototo. As a special gift for today, Hana-san and I will give you one more tattoo, free of charge, wherever you would like and whatever you would like." Thinking about it for a moment, he was struck with inspiration. While Hana was busy tattooing the Anbu mark on his left shoulder, he smiled up at his Onezen. A fox head sitting directly over 9 fox tails arranged in a circle, directly over my heart. She changed my life for the better and this will be my clan's new symbol, minus the fox head of course. Nodding her head, Yugo waited until Hana was finished and then asked Akari to stand so that they could do the requested tattoo. Once it was done he looked down at it and smiled. "That one is for you, Ka-san." "Thank you Akari-kun, I appreciate the touch. There is something we will need to talk about though, in regards to your clan and the first betrothal you have arranged as well as any other wives you marry." "Okay then, how about before dinner this evening so that we can discuss any possible courses of action with all who might be involved?" Once he had gotten the feeling that she agreed with his timing, he looked up at everyone there and grinned. "Well, this is another step towards my goal, Hoji-san." Gently smiling at the young man, Hiruzen nodded. "Indeed it is Akari-kun, now then I have a mission briefing for all of you in the morning, so be here at 8 and don't be late." Dismissed. Getting the attention of the 3 Anbu he needed to invite, he motioned for them to follow him. Once they had left the Hokage Tower, he led the way to one of the parks nearby. Once there he threw down a disposable privacy seal that he had created and then handed each of them an invite. "The invite is to a family dinner at my home tonight. I know that we can't discuss certain aspects of our lives, not even with our closest of loved ones, but I kinda had a feeling that I would pass the test and figured that it would be a good reason to celebrate tonight, as a family, because some of you are family already to me, and a few of you will become family to me in time." Looking around at all 3 of them, Akari smiled as he saw them all nod. "Well then let's get me kitted out with the Anbu gear I'm going to need, nay." Everyone simply smiled at the young man and then sunshined away. Next day, having awoken early the next morning, the young heir had conducted his morning business and gotten dressed in his new attire. A new sleeveless emerald green shirt that was covered by a dark blue Jonin-style Anbu vest, dark blue Anbu pants and the steel-toed boots, and his Hittite was the final touch as he finished getting dressed. On the way out the door, he let Mika-san know that he was going to be gone on a mission and didn't know how long he was going to be gone for. Disappearing in a swirl of ice shards, he reappeared in the Hokage's office with his mask on and ready to go. Seeing as he was the first one there, and that not even the Hokage was there yet, he covered himself in a genjutsu and hid his chakra levels and then waited for everyone else to get there. 5 minutes later everyone else was there and he pulled down the genjutsu and stood next to Weasel. Glancing up to see that they were all there, the Hokage sighed mentally. "I have 2 missions so I am going to need the 4 of you to split up. The first mission is to assess the efforts and capabilities of the rebels in Mist. From there if your assessment is favorable, the 2 that go are to remain and assist them. Do not get captured by their enemies as they are on a witch hunt against bloodline users. One of the 2 who will be going on this mission is Fox, as he will be needed if the assessment indeed turns out favorable, and the reason for that is because their Yondaime Mizukage is the Jinchuriki of the Sanbi." Stopping here for a moment, he could feel the tension and realized that there wasn't anything he could do about it now but pray that everything turned out well. The other mission is to remain off the books for now, because it involves subterfuge of the highest level due to the nature of the people you will be in contact with. I need 2 of you to deliver a scroll to the Sennin Jiraiya, and let him know that training mission or not, if he doesn't get back on the ball with his spy network I will have him marked as a nukenin and put a kill on sight order out for him in the bingo books. If he argues with you or tries to blow you off, Let him know that twice now in the last 6 months I have had to find out about some rather important events that could have had major ramifications from his spy network, and even then it was almost too late for us to do anything about it. Not to mention that they have told me that he has not been in contact with them for over a year." Giving himself a moment or two to calm down, he sighed and rubbed his temples with his fingers. "My apologies, I do not mean to take these things out on you, but lately I find myself wondering what the hell I was thinking allowing those idiots to carry out their foolish plan. I want you to make your plans and depart no later than noon." Looking around for a moment, he located the 2 scrolls he was searching for and tossed them to Dog. The blue-edged scroll contains your contact location and passwords to meet up with your contact in the port city of Itazu no Odori. The green-edged scroll is the one that I need delivered to Jiraiya. Once you have taken care of that, then and only then will the 2 of you link up with the others who will be in Mizu no Kuni. Understood. 4 replies of, "Hi, Hokage-sama," were his answer, and he nodded. "Good, then all I have to say is good luck and return safely." His only response was 4 nods, and then they vanished in various methods of shunshin. Once they were safely out of sight and hearing, he sagged back in his seat and tilted his head back. "May Kami watch over and protect you all." Once they had reappeared at the Anbu training ground, Kakashi removed his mask and turned towards the others. After gazing at both Itachi and Yugo for a moment, he sighed and looked to Akari. "I know that you have been in life and death situations before, Ototo. I want you to promise me something though. I need you to promise me that you will follow Itachi's instructions. You are important to me, and I am unsure of how long it will take us to locate our target and link back up with you." Taken aback for a moment, Akari nodded and sighed. "You have my word that I will do my best to follow Itachi's instructions." Smiling at his younger brother, Kakashi sighed mentally, relieved at how easily that had gone over. Clipping his mask back into place, he straightened his shoulders and turned to Yugo. "You're with me, Cat, Weasel and Fox. You are to head out to the contact's location and be there in 3 days. Good luck and be cautious." He then disappeared in a swirl of leaves along with Cat, leaving the other 2 to their own devices. Fox turned to Weasel and frowned even though he knew the other man couldn't see it. "I need to stop by and see Suki-chan before we leave, just to let her know I'm going to be gone for a while." Nodding at the young man, he smirked at Akari, grateful for the mask that he wore so that he wouldn't be able to see it. Disappearing in 2 swirls of fire, the Anbu training grounds were soon left empty. 3 days later, once they had arrived near the outskirts of Itazu no Odori, they slowed down and, after ensuring that there was no one around them, removed their masks and used a henge to conceal their looks. Looking around as they walked around the town, they stopped by a dango stand to grab some food and continued on. About a half hour later they found the inn that they were supposed to meet their contact at and headed inside. Once they had arranged for a room for the night, they then took a seat at table where they could observe everything and everyone going by. After ordering a bottle of sake and some food, they sat there quietly conversing for a little over an hour before someone came in that caught Akari's eye. Motioning to Itachi where only he could see, he communicated using Anbu hand signals that their contact had just shown up. Getting a nod in return, he stood and approached the table that she was sitting at with one other person, figuring that since he was the more unassuming of the 2 that he would be greeted with slightly less hostility than Itachi would have. Sitting down at the table he smiled lightly at the woman across from him. "The waters are cold this time of year." Catching the slight widening of her eyes, he watched as she nodded and spoke quietly. "Yes, they are indeed. I just hope that the fires will keep us warm. Have we kept you waiting long?" Shaking his head, he signaled Itachi to join them. "No, as we just got into town today. My companion and I have some questions for you before we leave with you." He then turned to Itachi once she nodded and motioned for him to take over the conversation. Taking a moment to gather his thoughts, Itachi nodded to his younger comrade before turning to their host. "I'm thinking that we should discuss this in a more private location. We have a room upstairs and I think it might be best if you and your companion joined us so that we aren't overheard." Smirking, the woman turned to her companion and looked at him in a questioning manner. He returned her gaze with certainty and nodded back at her. She then stood and motioned for them to lead the way, which Akari did, followed closely by the 2 strangers and Itachi as the rearguard. Upon reaching their room, Akari slapped a seal on the door and channeled a little chakra into it. Then slipped in some hand seals after biting his thumb, and slammed his hand into the floor. Kuchio's no jutsu, 2 three-tailed kitsune, one that was an icy blue in color and the other the blazing reddish-orange of a fire, popped out of a small cloud of smoke and looked to their summoner. "What do you require of us, Akari-sama?" Hiding his grimace, he spoke quietly to them, yet still loud enough to be heard by everyone there in the room. "Greetings to both of you, Shimo, Takibi. I need the two of you to make certain that we are not overheard by anyone. Do not attack and employ your stealth skills to observe and report any chakra usage outside of this room within 500 meters." Both nodding at their summoner, they popped out of the room as Akari looked up at his partner. "We should be secure now, so we can begin anytime you wish to." This got Itachi's attention and he turned towards the pair who were just sitting there, somewhat stunned by the ability of the young man. "The first thing that we would like to know is your names." "I am Uchiha Itachi, and my partner is Sojin Akari." It was at this point that the two of them dropped their respective henge and resumed their normal looks. The woman nodded and pointed to her companion first. "This is Ao, and my name is Terumi Mei. I must admit to being impressed as I wasn't expecting someone so young." Smirking just a bit, Itachi replied, "True, but we weren't expecting to meet with the leader of the rebels and her second in command either." "Touché. Now what questions do you have for us? Because I'll be honest with you, the reality of things is that we are in dire straits and we will need the aid of a Jinchuriki if we are to end Yagura's reign of terror and bloodshed." Motioning to his younger partner, Itachi let Akari take the floor. "That would be why I am here. What can you tell us as far as the numbers you are up against and what condition your own troops are in?" Mei turned to Ao and nodded. Sighing a little, Ao shook his head a bit. "We are outnumbered 3-1 at this point in time. Our troops are in good shape for now, but morale is slowly starting to waver as we have been slowly losing ground. Most of the civilians want Yagura gone, but with so many shinobi against us, the most they are willing to do is secretly provide us with food and medicine. In all honesty, if we can't win at least one major victory and soon, things will come crashing down around our ears and the rebellion will fail. The worst part is that if Yagura wins, it will not bode well for countries like Hai no Kuni and Kaminari no Kuni who have well-known bloodlines." Sitting back in their chairs, the two Konoha nin took their time sorting through the information they had just received. Itachi turned to Akari and raised an eyebrow at him, to which he responded by shrugging. Turning back to the Kiri nin, he slowly nodded his head. "If we assist you and you win, have you given any thought to who will become the new Mizukage? Also, what are you offering for our services as we are here in an off-the-books mission because of the chance of capture?" The two mist ninja looked at each other and nodded, and then Mei looked at both of them. "Once we win, I will more than likely become the Godime Mizukage. As far as what you would receive in return for your services, I am afraid that we won't be able to afford to give you much in return. I am inclined to offer an alliance with Konoha with very favorable terms, but other than that I can't really offer much else." Sharing a quick glance, the two younger ninja nodded. "That is acceptable. Perhaps we could receive a favor redeemable at a later date instead of direct payment, but nothing too unreasonable, of course." "That is indeed acceptable. I am guessing that Akari-san here is the Jinchuriki of the Kyūbi no Kitsune." Simply smirking at her, Akari bowed slightly. "Indeed, I am Mei-san. I compliment you on your deductive reasoning." Smiling brightly at the young man, she nodded her head once. "If that is all for your questions, I suggest we all get ready for tomorrow, as that is when our ship returns for us. We leave at daybreak." Before they got up to go, Akari flared his chakra twice and then there were 2 puffs of smoke that appeared in front of him. Glancing down at his 2 summons, he spoke quietly. "Anything to report?" "Nothing, Akari-sama. There were a few flares of chakra, but they were much further out and were separate instances. Plus they were all in the direction of Konoha." "Very well done, you two. Now I have one more task for you and it will last until we meet back up at daybreak tomorrow. Takibi, your job is to keep a watch for Mei-san and Ao-san. Shimo, the same applies for you with Itachi and me. Stay out of sight at all times, and if anyone tries anything suspicious, wake us and we'll figure out what kind of action is needed from there. Any questions?" Getting 2 head shakes as his answer, he smiled and turned towards Mei and Ao. "Just a small precaution enabling us to get a restful night's sleep, Takibi is a fire-oriented kitsune, just so you know if anything comes up." Thanking the young man, Mei and Ao got up and left for their own room. As soon as they had left, both of the summons left as well, leaving the two alone in their room. Lying back on his bed for a moment, Akari sighed. Turning his head to Itachi, he frowned. "Do you think that we gave too much away at the moment?" Itachi lay back on his own bed for a bit and thought about it. "No, I don't feel like they are going to take advantage of us or anything like that. So I think that we did just fine with the level of information that we gained as well as gave away. Before we go to sleep tonight, we need to make sure we send a report to Kakashi. I will write it up if you will take care of summoning a fox to send it." "Agreed. I am just a tad bit nervous though. I've fought bandits in Nukenon before, but in an actual battle or part of a civil war. I'm not scared so much as anxious, as I know that this will be on a far larger scale than anything I have ever been through before." Itachi turned to look at the young man that he regarded as part of his own family. "I trust you to do what you feel is truly right. It isn't all that uncommon to feel that way, all it means is that you are human. What you need to worry about is when you feel nothing at all, for that is when you have truly lost all touch with humanity." Exhaling heavily, Akari turned to look at Itachi and smiled slightly. "Thanks Itachi, I appreciate that greatly. I suppose that we should get that report written up so Aniki can get it sent to the Hokage along with his own report." Closing his eyes for a moment, Akari thought back to the conversation he had had with his family the night before he had left. It had been extremely nerve-wracking as he wasn't too certain how well the topic would go over. It had involved what he and Miyuki-chan had discussed earlier that day. Flashback start. He had just gotten home and was putting the finishing touches on a few notes for a jutsu he was trying to finish, when he sighed and stretched out for a minute. Taking a gander at the clock, he saw that he had about an hour before anyone would start to show up, and he remembered what his Ka-san had asked of him. Wrapping up what he had been working on, he put the scroll into a seal that was tattooed on his wrist and sat on his bed. Relaxing, Akari quickly entered his mindscape and found Miyuki lying out in the sun in her kitsune form. Approaching her, he lay down with his head on her flank, just soaking in the closeness he felt. After a few minutes of this, he gently shook her awake and lay still while she woke up and shifted to her human form. In short order, he was lying there with his head in her lap, and she had her hands running through his hair. Smiling up at her, he gently cleared his throat. "What was that you wanted to talk with me about earlier, Ka-san?" Returning his smile, she sighed softly as she looked off into the distance. "I know how alone you have been most of your life, and I know that you desire a large and loving family. What would you say if I told you that there is a way for you to ensure not only your bloodline, but to ensure that your wives would live as long as you will, and also enjoy the slower aging effects that you will?" As he considered the option, his eyes became rather unfocused, and thus he didn't notice as Miyuki laid a motherly kiss on his forehead. He was lost in thought about it for a few minutes and finally shook his head and refocused his eyes on her. "What exactly does this entail? I'm sure that whatever the actual process is, it won't be painless." Shaking her head sadly, she frowned a bit. "No, unfortunately. It is a rather simple process, and it involves you channeling my chakra into your partner after biting them. It won't leave a mark, but it requires physical contact for at least 8 hours after you channel enough of my chakra into them so that I can work through the required changes to their blood and body. I won't be changing as much, so they will still be related to their parents and not to you, but I would need to do it soon, at least in the case of Setsuki." Growing concerned, Akari looked up at her with a slight frown. "I only have 2 questions, Ka-san. First is, when you say physical contact, what exactly do you mean? Second, just why would you need to do this sooner for Setsuki than you would need to for someone else?" Miyuki chuckled at his questions. "Your first question is rather easy to answer. All you would need to do is sleep next to each other, preferably holding each other close. The second one is a touch more complicated, as the reason for needing to do it sooner is because on the off chance that Setsuki actually activates her Sharingan, it would take far more of my chakra than would be safe for her to have in her system, and it would more than likely kill her. So if you think about it, not only does she gain all the benefits from your bloodline, but she also goes from maybe gaining her Sharingan, to definitely gaining the CG if we do this." He laid there stunned for a few minutes before snapping out of it. Looking up at her with gratitude, he sat up and tackled her in a hug, all the while mumbling his thanks to her for her kindness and care. She simply hugged him back, rocking him back and forth until it was nearly time to get ready to receive the guests for dinner that night. Flashback end. Akari smiled to himself as he remembered the reactions he had gotten from everyone who had participated in that particular conversation. He would admit to a certain level of nervousness since Setsuki was going to give him her answer once he got back from this mission. Hoping that she would say yes, he shook his head to clear it and sat up. "You about done with that report, Itachi?" Getting a nod from his older partner, he quickly ran through the process of summoning, and a one-tailed fox popped up. "Greetings, Akari-sama, you have something for me to do." Picking up the small kitsune and scratching behind her ears, he chuckled as he spoke to her. "Yes, Yuri-chan, I do indeed. Here in a few minutes, once my partner here is done, I need you to take the report that he is writing to Hitaki Kakashi. I want you to ensure that no one else but Azuki Yugo is around when you deliver it. Stealth is essential, so that's why I summoned you, because you are the sneakiest kitsune I know next to Miyuki-chan." Giggling softly, Yuri nodded and lay down in his lap, enjoying his attention for the moment. Itachi smiled slightly as he took in Akari leaning back against the wall with Yuri lying on his lap. It never ceased to amaze him how big a heart the young man had, especially with how badly he had been treated growing up. Clearing his throat to get Akari's attention, he watched as the young man's eyes snapped open. "I'm ready to send the report, are you ready?" Nodding his head, Akari leaned forward and stretched his hand out. Once he had the scroll in hand, he held it out for Yuri to grab hold of it. One last scratch of her ears and she was gone in a puff of smoke. Standing and stretching, the young man smiled at his sensei. "I'm going to grab some food before turning in, care to join me?" Taking a moment to consider this, Itachi nodded. "That and I would like to discuss a few different seals I have thinking about to see if they could be modified in different ways." Shrugging his shoulders as he led the way out of their room, Akari just smiled. "I'm sure they could be, as Fuinjutsu is probably among the strongest and most flexible, if not the most versatile, of the ninja arts." Early next morning, having gotten used to a funky sleep schedule was a huge benefit for Akari, as he awoke in plenty of time to shower and was downstairs getting a large breakfast order placed by the time everyone else was there. Getting a couple of warmed chunks of raw liver, he greeted his summons. "Ohio Shimo, Takibi. I trust that everything went well last night." "Hi Akari-sama. There was only one isolated incident, but we quickly managed to root it out before it became a problem." After hearing about the root possibly getting involved where they shouldn't be, Akari sighed mentally. "Very well done, you two. Here is your reward for such good work." Holding out his hands, he allowed them each to eat the chunks of liver, channeled some water-natured chakra and washed his hands of the residue, and then scratched their ears a bit. "One last thing, you two, I need one of you to relay a message to your eldest sister. I need you to let her know that her services might very well be needed in the not-too-distant future." He looked at both of them, trying to impress upon them the importance of this message. Shimo and Takibi simply nodded. "Hi Akari-sama. You do realize though that Shinibana-an is going to ask for you to start learning senjutsu soon if you do summon her here, right?" Sighing aloud this time, he nodded. "I know, and soon I won't be able to turn her offer down, but that is not an issue for the moment. Now go back home and ensure that she gets my message." They popped away, leaving everyone at the table staring at the young man. "What?" was his response as he sat there blinking in confusion at everyone there. Itachi was the one who responded in humorous undertones. "I believe that the cause for shock in this case is the fact that no one ever knew that any of the other summon families besides the toads and the snakes could teach the art of senjutsu to their summoner." He then looked to the other two that were there and received nods from the both of them. Mei cleared her throat and shook her head before speaking up as well. "There's also the fact that you are quite possibly the youngest person I have ever heard of being able to summon, let alone being taught the sage arts." Her voice was soft and respectful as she spoke, somehow also filled with awe at the strength this young man possessed. Chuckling lightly, Akari simply nodded at them. "Well, dig in before it gets cold. We need to be at our best, so I woke a little early and arranged for this spread." Throughout the meal everyone was discussing the upcoming trip and what they should expect from their hosts. They learned about how the seven swordsmen of Kiri had attempted a coup to try and overthrow Yagura and how the attempt had failed. Most of them had then disappeared, with the exception of Ringo Amayuri and Chojuro, who had both joined the rebellion to aid Mei. When he heard this, Akari got a gleam in his eyes as he thought about getting the opportunity to spar with one of the seven swordsmen. He continued to listen as they spoke about other issues that they had come across, like the extermination of the Kagaya and Yuki clans and their bloodlines. It was while they were finally leaving the town and out to sea that he got up the courage to ask about what their bloodlines were that he got the shock of his life. "Nay, Mei-san, can you tell me a little bit about the two clans and what their bloodlines were?" Akari stood at the railing, enjoying the sea breeze that was blowing in his face while they talked. Her eyes closed. Mei mentally shrugged as she thought about whether or not she should be talking about these things when she realized it really couldn't do any harm. The Kagaya had the ability to call their bones out from their body in various ways, either as weapons or as ways of entrapping their foes. The Yuki clan was able to utilize one of the sub-elemental chakra as their bloodline, much like my own family. The Terumi clan has the ability to use both Yuden and Futen sub-elements as part of our Kekkei Genkei. Here the young smiled as he thought about what her elemental affinities were. "So you're very similar to me then. I was given a new bloodline by the Biju that I contain the ability to use the Shikuden and Hyouden sub-elements." He trailed off for a moment when he sensed that she was staring at him. Opening his eyes and looking at her face, Akari was surprised to see the look of shock on her face. "What's wrong, Mei-san?" Shaking her head, she turned her head to look back out to sea. The sub-element of the Yuki clan was Hyouden. Realizing that he might have brought up some bad memories, he sighed. "Gomen Mei-san, as I did not mean to remind you of anything bad." Waving his concerns off for the moment, she turned back to him. "You couldn't have known Akari-san. I will say this though, you will find it much easier to use your Hyouden abilities while in Mizu no Kuni, seeing as it will be easier for you to draw out water from the surrounding area to use in your jutsu." Taking a moment to consider this new revelation, Mei was struck by an idea. "Say Akari-san, what would you say to receiving copies of any jutsu that they had, if we can find any of their scrolls?" Growing wide-eyed for a moment, Akari stopped to think about it for a bit. "Will this be in lieu of my receiving a favor for later?" The red-haired woman immediately shook her head. "No, this will be a bonus of sorts, as there is no guarantee of there even being anything of theirs still around." Bowing ever so slightly, Akari drew her attention back towards him. "Even if we find nothing to help me, I will be honored to help in any way I can." Stunned for a few seconds, Mei turned to look at the young man. "Why would you put yourself out there for us even foregoing any type of payment?" Standing up straight, he headed for where their quarters were on the ship. "That's quite simple. Because it is the right thing to do.